Welcome. I'm Mark Garrity, and this is Western Wisconsin Journal. Tonight we are turning the table, so to speak, and your host will be our guest. So our guest tonight is Jamie Johnson, and Jamie, welcome.
Thanks, Mark.
And so, as I understand this, it's been 6 or 7 years that you have, or more, that you've been involved with Power News and now Western Wisconsin Journal. Is that right?
That's right, yeah. I forget now whether the year was 2006 or 2007, but this is definitely a change. I've never been on this side of the table.
And well, we'll try to make it easy for you. I first met you when you were an assistant DA in Eau Claire County, and I'm aware and was aware at that time that you grew up in southern Wisconsin.
That's right.
And where was that?
Well, I was born in Monroe and started going to school there. My parents had been on farms before I went to school. I actually am the oldest of 5 boys. And so when I got to be 13, my dad said, we have 5 boys that can work on a farm. So he went back to the farm, and we had a farm north of New Glarus. So I went to high school. We had 151 in the entire high school, and 43, I think, in my graduating class.
Wow. Was this a dairy farm or a grain farm?
Oh, it was a small, more of a part-time farm, because my dad was heavy equipment operator, so that was his summer job. But we had cows. We milked up to 27 cows, I think, and we had pigs and horses and sheep and goats and
wow,
yeah, the whole shebang. And I was in Future Farmers of America in a small high school. I kind of had 2 tracks, more the college prep and the vocational. I did actually more of the vocational because of the farming and ag background, but when it came to the chores, my brothers were more the mechanical machinery guys, and I liked working with the animals. I milked the cows. So.
Great. And then you went on to Carthage College, is that right?
That's right, yep. A small Lutheran liberal arts college in just north of Kenosha. And
why did you choose Carthage?
Well, I think there was a heavy influence I was confirmed Lutheran, baptized Presbyterian, but had a pretty strong faith as a kid, and our minister steered me towards private colleges. He wanted me to go to Luther College because that's where he had went, but we would lose the Wisconsin tuition grant, and financial aid was pretty important to our family. So I stayed in Wisconsin and was very glad of it. I went double majored there, criminal justice and political science, and came that close to becoming a minister instead of an attorney. But
wow. Why did you choose to go into law school?
Well, my mom said that when I was a baby, and she was 18 years old when I was born, she would rock me at night to sleep and say, grow up to either be a doctor or a lawyer. So I had to choose one or the other, I guess. It was kind of instilled in me. But one of my early idols was Abraham Lincoln. And when I was learning to read, and I think in the 3rd grade, those were the first adult books that I read, was about Abraham Lincoln, and every biography I could get my hands on, I read about him. So
I remember last year when the movie came out that you actually met a friend and went to see the film opening weekend.
Yeah, we kind of met halfway. He's from the UP, and he was a political science major at Carthage as well, and we went and saw it in Wausau, Wisconsin, and loved the movie Lincoln. Yes, yep. Very good.
Very well done. So you're a runner now. Were you involved in sports back in growing up or in high school?
I was pretty small for my age, and too small to play football. I was statistician instead. So I loved numbers. Don't know why I went into law if I liked numbers so much. But I did wrestle, and I actually wrestled 98 pounds 3 years in a row. That tells you how small I was.
Good for you.
But no, I didn't really have running in my blood or anything like that. But my dad was always outdoors, obviously working, doing chores, and so running, having this white-collar job that we have sitting at desk, I need some kind of outlet, and running's been a great way to relieve stress.
Great. So you went to University of Wisconsin-Madison for law school?
Yes.
And what year did you graduate from there?
87.
Was there an area of law that you were real interested in while in law school?
You know, I didn't have a big pull. I interviewed with kind of the big firms in Madison, did a summer internship, and somewhere during that last year of law school I said, you know, I want to be able to maybe prosecute. And I changed all my classes to take crim law. I'd advanced criminal procedure classes, and as you know, they're taught by some of the best attorneys in southern Wisconsin and, well, throughout the state, go down and lecture there. And so I took as many practicums and clinicals as I could, and with a goal of maybe being an assistant attorney general or a U.S. attorney someday.
And then you went on to Eau Claire County.
Right. I had a brief stop in the middle there. I was got asked to be on with the Court of Appeals. Judge LaRock was his law clerk for a year, which was a great experience. He himself was a former prosecutor in Marathon County and also a judge there. And when an opportunity for jobs, that was during a recession in '87, after that the stock market fell in October, there weren't many jobs available. And so when one came up about 2 months before my job was supposed to end, he said, go ahead and take it. So I started in early July of '88, actually, in Eau Claire. Okay. And had Ruth Bachman was my boss, and then she left months after I started, and then Ray Pellrine was my boss. But they weren't shy about giving me cases, and in fact, I was very eager to get work, and I tried over 24 jury trials in less than 2 years.
Get you right involved in the business.
That's right.
So, and then you moved, when did you move to Hudson?
Well, that was 1990. I got hired by Lohman Nelson, was the name of the law firm, in March. I married my wife in April, moved to North Hudson in June, and we were pregnant with our first in August. So wow. It was a big year, 1990.
And so when you came to Hudson, Lohman Nelson is a Twin City firm that has had an office since, I believe, 1979 or so in Hudson with Tom Jacobson.
Right.
And it was just the two of you at that time?
Well, actually, there was Tom Nemec, too. And
forgot about Tom.
Yeah. And you're right. The firm had quite an identity, being an insurance defense firm, and that changed somewhere in the late 90s. I think the Minneapolis office wanted to go more toward the plaintiff side and more diversification. We've stuck with some of our long-term clients, but we've had some diversification, and the Hudson office has grown. We now have 3 partners here in Hudson and an associate. So I'm probably 10 years in the making as far as me having an associate. It's really helpful to have that. So
great. So what type of law do you practice?
Mostly insurance defense. It's still almost 50% of my practice, but I've gotten into construction cases. When we had the great growth in the late 90s, there'd be disputes between contractors and subcontractors, and also real estate transactions sometimes go wrong, collection actions, fire cases. So I've had a lot of diversity, and I like that. I've even have some criminal cases on the defense side, and I was just in Menominee in front of Judge Stewart on one.
So being, even though we're on the edge of the metro area, we're still somewhat rural. Both of us have a practice where we have to drive quite a bit. So
right.
How many counties do you think over the course since 1990 have you been in as far as appearances?
Oh boy, I would say, I bet close to at least 30. I know that everything from here to Langlade County, I've tried a jury trial there, and every county in between there and up to Duluth and over to Ashland. I think Marinette, I might not have had a case in Marinette yet. So that takes care of the northern half, and get down to La Crosse still quite frequently, and I've even been to Milwaukee on occasion. But
and we learned, at least I've learned, that every county has its own distinct personality.
They sure do. They sure do.
So, in 2009, you received an award from the Wisconsin Law Journal. Is that correct?
Was it 2009? Okay.
According to your website, it's 2009.
Okay. So. I guess, it's about 5 years ago, yeah, because I was rereading that article, and the Wisconsin Law Journal has an annual award they call Leaders in the Law, and they give more than just one attorney, but usually they recognize lawyers who do things also outside the practice of law. And I think that the spin that they were looking at was, the service, the community service, and I know they highlighted both this show, or its predecessor actually was Power News, and it's been renamed to Western Wisconsin Journal since that article came out. And then the other was the family service, the service projects we've attended as a family when we helped out with Hurricane Katrina.
Okay. And segue into your family. Tell us about your family here in Hudson.
Well, my wife, Jean Johnson, is a behavioral psychologist. She actually, after we got married, and she was pregnant, I think, with our youngest, when she said she wanted to go back and get her graduate degree in psychology, and I said, okay. And so now she has a doctorate in clinical psychology, and she likes that practice. She's self-employed, and so she's able to adjust her hours, and she is licensed in both Wisconsin and Minnesota. And then my stepdaughter, Alex, our oldest, is a registered nurse, licensed in Minnesota. I think someday she'll be here in Wisconsin, but she's over in Eagan. And the youngest two are at Stout. My son is a senior, and my daughter is currently a sophomore.
And any of them looking at going into the legal business?
I don't think so, but if anybody did, it would be definitely my youngest, because she has the gift for gab. So,
and she's the one that was the exchange student also.
Yes, she had a great experience over in Germany. It was very rewarding, I know, for her, and we were very proud of the fact that she was able to go over there. And she took kind of a gap year between high school and college, and actually attended a German high school for a year. And it was a very good experience. She ended up getting some college credit out of the German that she learned. So.
And you mentioned your work with Katrina, and that was through your church at Bethel?
Right, Bethel and a couple other surrounding churches. We did a caravan down there in July of, I think that was July of 2009. And yeah, we went down there in the middle of the summer. Some of the days the heat index was like 110. We were putting up a foundation for a free clinic, and my wife and son, they worked on, I remember they had masks on. They did installing fiberglass in houses, fiberglass installation of insulation. And then my youngest, Sarah, was not quite legally old enough to work out in the house. Now, we returned after she turned 16, then the next spring. Because we were there, we were enjoying it. We said, kids, they're talking about doing a spring break, one over spring break. Would you be willing to come here in spring break? And they didn't hesitate. So that one we also combined with kind of a family trip, because we stayed in New Orleans. But the work we were doing was in Biloxi.
Okay. So. And you're very involved in organizations here in town. And what organizations have you been involved in over the years?
Well, I think at Bethel, Lutheran Church, I got involved in the leadership there after my unsuccessful attempts at running for state representative back in the mid-90s. But I've been involved in different events with the Chamber of Commerce. I've served on the board of my law firm, and but far and above, in boosters, I've been coached the kids and was active when they were in that age in the youth sports. The YMCA, I've helped out there with both coaching and youth in government, being an advisor for that. I've volunteered at the high school quite a bit with the Strive mentorship and
the senior party.
And the senior party, which was, yes.
That's not a little thing.
No, but I want to give my wife a lot of credit, because she's much more organized than I am, but that is an awesome organization. I think it's a great thing that they are able to do to put on for kids.
It's now called SAFE?
Yes. Initially the acronym was Senior All Night Fun Event, but now it's student alcohol-free events, because they've expanded to prom now. And this last year, the Hudson Prom was on a boat, the after prom, if you will. So the kids were kind of confined to a boat, and I heard it was very successful and very well received. So I'm not sure whether that's going to be repeated, because when I ran for school board, then I said I can't be on both. A little bit of a conflict there. So, but that's senior all-night party was quite the endeavor, and it's well supported by the parents. And I think it's a great community event.
And
of course, I don't want to leave out Rotary.
No, we're going to talk about Rotary in just a second.
Okay.
And you've also been involved in some statewide organizations through the state bar, as I recall.
Actually, it was the governor appointed me to the Judicial Selection Advisory Council, and so yes, I was going down there pretty regularly, about every other month, and sometimes they would double up if they had 2 openings. It doesn't happen as often in Wisconsin as Minnesota, because as you know, we select judges mostly by popular election. Having been a former candidate yourself, you know about that.
Well aware of that.
And in Minnesota, they choose their judges by selection committee first, and governor appoints, and then they run for an election within, I think it's 18 or 19 months. They have to run for election in that first time period. But so that was a unique experience to be able to see it on the inside, and people think it's quite the political matter, but it really isn't, because you have to select a judge that is going to be fit for the job, number one, and number two, you don't want to recommend. First of all, we didn't select the person. It was narrowed to usually 3 or 4 candidates, and then the governor would do an interview, and then he would select who he thought was right for the job. But you don't want to recommend somebody to the governor that wouldn't have any shot at being reelected. Mm-hmm. And so, that was got to meet other attorneys and from other parts of the state and see their viewpoint on things. But yeah, it's good experience.
And you're currently the past president of the Hudson Daybreak Rotary Club.
That's right. Yes.
So,
and I have you to thank for that. Well, you had been asking me to join Rotary for probably 10 years, and I knew I know it was shortly after I came to town, and obviously the kids, we were raising them. I just thought the time would be right. And once they got into high school and they were more on their own, and I joined and was asked to get involved in the leadership within a couple years. I find it's really changed my life. I mean, given me a whole nother purpose in life. I really believe in the ideals of Rotary. So.
And tell us a little bit about that. What's been your involvement in the club?
Well, it started with right away getting on a committee. That's what we try to do. You've been a membership chair for the club as well, and it's getting the members involved right away. And I got involved in the gala, which is kind of an annual event and one of their big fundraisers. I was very intrigued with the different organizations that our local Rotary clubs have supported, both the Noon Club and the Daybreak Club. Not always the same groups, but they work in tandem on different things like the golf outing and the gala. So the fundraising I liked the hands-on projects. And I remember within the first couple years, there was a house over in New Richmond that one of our members was involved in fixing up. And so I was up on a roof with Dave Robson and shingling this house, and it ended up selling, and some of the proceeds then were able to be funneled back to community organizations. But what I really like about our club is the focus on youth and community. Those are very, very strong things, and I know I can speak for my wife that we feel like Hudson is our hometown. I mean, even if we stopped working tomorrow, it's not like we would retire back to where we came from. She came from southern Minnesota. I came from southern Wisconsin. This is our hometown now, and so we really like it here, and I love being involved in the community, whether it's ringing bells at Salvation Army or cleaning brush at Prospect Park. So I like the combination of the hands-on work, because that being raised on a farm had a lot of hands-on experience there, but also being able to work with youth and making a difference in people's lives.
And how did you get involved in Power News as such?
Well, Dick Schager, who was a member of my church, Bethel Lutheran Church, and right next door here to where we film this, he had this idea, and he said, I want to go out to lunch with you. I have this idea. And he said, I'd like to do this show, and we would do different segments on politics and education and the arts. And, I said, yeah, that's great. Go for it. And then he said, well, I'd like you to help out once in a while. And I thought, man, I'm looking at my watch, and I'm a busy guy. I've got a career. I still had kids at home. And but then I said, sure, I can do a couple segments for you, and ended up liking it so much that, we try to do at least one segment a month. Some months we've done two, and some months we've missed occasionally when it's tougher to find guests. But it was Power News stood for People of Wisconsin Envisioning Results. That was Dick's acronym. He actually copyrighted it. So when he decided that he would retire from being an active producer, then we needed a name change, and that's where we came up with Western Wisconsin Journal. The purpose of the show really was to help get Wisconsin news to people of Western Wisconsin and vice versa, the voice of Western Wisconsin for people down in Madison. And at one time, this show was being rebroadcast in Madison, Rice Lake, Eau Claire, over 100,000 homes that subscribed to cable TV.
Wow. Who would, over the years, did you have any favorites of people that you interviewed?
Oh, yeah, there's been so many. I would say among the favorites are the nonprofits, even though our segment is considered the legal, government, political, and I've always had an interest in politics, and even when I worked in Washington, D.C. for a summer, and my boss let me go to the Hill and meet my senator, who was Proxmire and Kasten back in 1984, and congressmen and Ralph Nader, and all these people that were lobbying on the Hill for that particular day. So I've always had an interest in politics, but I would say, the nonprofits. It's the organizations like Rotary or the veterans organizations. Being able to spotlight them, we've had what's commonly referred to as the Seeing Eye dogs. I remember when we did a segment on those, and the dog was right there for the whole interview. So that kind of thing is kind of cool to be able to tell the community about these different organizations that are out there helping people and trying to improve lives.
You had an opportunity to interview Chief Justice Abrahamson.
Yes. As far as the most notable, she would probably be the Chief Justice of the Wisconsin Supreme Court, probably would have to be at the top list.
Very engaging lady.
She is. Oh, yeah. An incredible dynamo of energy for somebody who, I think when I interviewed her, she was like months away from turning 80. I think she's 80 now, if not within a year anyway. She's in her upper 70s, and you wouldn't know it by meeting her. I actually met her the first time when I interned on the Supreme Court while I was in law school in 1985, or 86. It was 85 or 86. The justice I worked with on a daily basis was Bill Bablich, who had been a former state senator, but and Shirley was not the Supreme. She was the number three on seniority, and then 25 some years later, I'm interviewing her for this show.
So this is not a question that I've let you know about, but Bablich was a cook, right? Or I don't know if you knew about that.
Oh, yeah.
He used to do demonstrations.
Oh, yeah. He was a big food and wine connoisseur. And I remember he threw a party when that year I clerked in 84, or 83, no, so get my years straight here, 86. I was hired by a law firm, DeWitt Porter. His brother, Steve, worked at that firm. And when his younger brother, baby brother as you referred to him, was appointed the Secretary of the Department of Corrections, he threw a party and asked me if I would come, and I said, sure. Anyway, he gave me a tour. He had this elaborate wine selection, and it's just fascinating individual. He actually went back and got a Master's of Law degree while he was on the Supreme Court, and I can't remember what the area of law it was in, but he was a very intelligent guy.
And but you have a history with a close friend of cooking yourself, as I understand.
Oh yes, yeah. My best friend Doug Mesler, who got me into running, and met him about 25 years ago this month, actually, for the first time. We have very similar interests, and he's a former state representative in Minnesota and got appointed to the bench by Governor Pawlenty. And about the time that he was appointed to the bench, we were at the Home and Garden Show, and they were doing either a Home and Garden Show or it was the Minnesota State Fair. It was one of the two, and they had demonstrations for like different things, and one of them was a lefse maker, and he said, you know what? Spur of the moment, he said, I'm going to do it, because he has Norwegian background, as do I. So I said, we're going to buy this together. This is our joint investment, but we'll keep it at my place, and we'll come over. And so we've already made our first batch of lefse. It's been consumed as well. So didn't even last till Thanksgiving.
So for our non-Norwegian viewers, lefse, describe what it is.
Well, lefse is basically like a potato burrito shell is kind of the way I refer it, tortilla. In Spain or in Mexico, it'd be referred to as tortilla, but my dad, who also makes it, he is, a throwback to, making it from scratch. He actually rices the potatoes and makes everything from scratch. We make it from a mix. The last mix we bought was from the Norske Nook, so it still has the connection, but it's much easier to mix it together, and you add your different ingredients and you roll it out, and it's fun to make, as much fun to make as it is to eat, but nothing beats warm lefse right after it's made.
So I digress there. And you are currently a member serving a term on the Hudson Board of Education for the school district, correct?
That's correct.
And you were elected this past April?
That's right, yes.
So what compelled you to run for election?
Well, as I stated earlier, I always had interest in government, and had been asked to run for the school board from the previous superintendent dating back to the late 90s, and always flattered to be asked to run. It seemed like we had quality leadership. And then, we've had some more, we haven't been able to address the space issue. There was a recommendation to build an elementary school first and then a secondary space, which was going to be a high school. And that was from a task force that was formed in 2003, 2004, right in there. And now it's been nearly 10 years and we still haven't done the second half of that. We built the elementary school, which is Rivercrest, and I've been involved in referendums. Education's always been important. But I thought that now that I've served on different boards and had different leadership positions, I had something to offer and try to make sure that we can bring this to completion. So that's one of the primary issues, but it's certainly not the only one. There's a lot going on in education. So.
Do you serve on any specific committees?
Yes, I'm on the Facility and Grounds Committee, so that is involves everything from maintenance of our buildings, and we had a recent steam line break, to the facilities themselves, and then to planning for the secondary space and making recommendations for the board as a whole. We had a work session last night on that issue. But in addition to facilities, also on learning and program development, which is also where the real teaching is all about. And it's great to work with the administrators and have that frontline experience of what and how our kids are being taught.
Kind of a combination question. What gives you the most satisfaction, and what frustrates you the most about being on the school board? Well,
what gives me the most satisfaction is I would say being able to be not responsible for the day-to-day education part. I'm not going to take credit for the successes we've had. I think that's clearly the most satisfying, is to see that no matter who's on the board, and actually we've had good continuity of administrations, and I give a lot of credit to the administrators, but also to our teachers. We have fabulous teachers here in Hudson. So it's great to see the successes that our kids have had. We've had national merit scholars, and so that's clearly the most satisfying. I'd say as far as frustrations, it's that inability to do anything on your own. When you're a school board member, you have to act as a board. And you can't talk about board business if there's more than a quorum is 4 board members. You still work closely with the administration, and you can have your opinion. I've already been on the short end of a 6-to-1 vote already. And that's not really frustrating at all, because it is satisfying to be able to say your piece and have input. But it's a bit of a feel like, rather than being a captain of a cruise liner, if you will, a very big ship, you have a committee. And you can imagine a committee deciding how to steer that boat. Even if you get the majority steering it in one direction, it's a cruise liner, and it takes very, very slow movement. The inability to get something done today, if you see this problem and not being able to solve it tomorrow, is a little bit frustrating. But we are making progress, and so I think that we will try to do the best thing for the community.
And it is so exciting to see not only the sports teams succeed, but the choirs and the theater department, and to see kids going off to Quiz Bowl and whatever it might be,
Right.
and the exuberance of the students. It's
It
really
is.
refreshing.
Yeah, I think that maybe some folks who have been here a long time, I know you were born and raised here, almost now it's just assumed that's the way it is, but having come from another community where they didn't enjoy that kind of success, you're right, we have an incredibly talented pool of kids, and I think we have very concerned families, very involved families. We have strong PTA organizations, and you pick the sport at Hudson Basketball Association, the volleyball group, the soccer group, led by really quality individuals who donate a lot of hours, and I think that's what makes the whole community go.
Do you have an approach as far as when controversial issues might be coming up? How do you attack those?
Well, you're right. There's can be an approach. I try to look at it from all sides and do my research. I've gone on the internet, when I've been asked to look at an issue. Obviously we're given materials from the administration, but I still do my own research, and ask what can be tough questions. But I try to look at it from the standpoint of either putting myself in the shoes of whoever it is that's doing, or saying, if this involved my brother's family, how would I decide it? It's tough to have to sit in on an expulsion hearing, but
Right.
you have to do not what's just best for the individual, but for the whole district. And so it can be tough, but in the end, I haven't had to lose sleep over decisions that were made, because I know that it was in the best interest. And so yeah, it's trying to get as much facts, though. I think there's a lot of people that have opinions, and I want to always find out, well, what, obviously you feel strongly about that, but why is that the case? And asking the why questions, because I may feel one way that doesn't necessarily agree, but if that person ends up coming up with facts, and I've done it already on issues where I thought we were going to go down this one path, but once I explored it, found out more facts, I decided, well, that path I was inclined to take isn't the best, and I'm willing to go off in a different direction.
And that whole expulsion issue, I mean, that's one segment of the job that never really gets talked about, and it's got to be one of the toughest things, because you're facing, like you say, not only what's in the best interests of the school and the public, but the student and the long-term effects.
Right.
It's scary.
Well, and that was my first actual time that I ever met our current superintendent, Mary Bowen Egebron. I was defending a student who was being expelled, and it was a very hard thing. And I did my job, which was to advocate. This individual wanted to stay in the school, and ultimately, they didn't. But my understanding was there's always that opportunity for re-entry after a certain period of time, and my understanding was that student earned it. So in the end, I think it worked out best for everyone concerned.
As far as the school district issues, what on the horizon do you see as things that you just know are coming? You hear about facilities or Common Core and various things such as that.
Right. Well, I think the three major ones, first, the space issue, which again has lingered for the last 10 years. I think that we're starting to crystallize it. We had hoped that we had turned the corner with on the dog track proposed purchase, and I was involved in that referendum, and I was on the Vote Yes committee, and which was successful, and I thought we had a pretty sound voice from the community saying that they would like to see that be the location of the new high school. Unfortunately, it didn't work out with regard to the zoning aspect to it, and so now we're on to Plan B, and I think that's definitely something in the forefront that I can't speak for the other board members, but I would like to see that get on a referendum for maybe the fall of 2014 would be a strong goal that I would work towards. Second would be the Common Core standards, which have come into the news lately. It really was adopted a while back already, and we're pretty far into, about 3-4 years into the development of the curriculum. It's still an evolving process. But since I am on that committee of learning and program development, I'm very impressed with the rigor with which the standards have been set. We don't want to have low standards, and we want our kids to be able to compete with graduates from other states. And so that's why I'm impressed with that rigor, and I think that the test scores have proved that out, that Hudson stands up to the challenge, and we just scored the highest ever ACT average from this community. So we're on an upward trend, and I would like being able to just maintain that would be a good goal, but even improve it. And then third, after the Common Core and space, would be, and I had it just a second ago, would be the pay for performance. Obviously, Act 10 or was it Act 10, Act 11, where Governor Walker's change to the whole collective bargaining with teachers.
Act 10, I believe.
It was Act 10 in 2011. That's what the 11 and the 10 was throwing me off. But I distinctly remember we were on spring break and watching on the news what was going on in Madison. And that caused a lot of emotion on both sides, became a very partisan issue. Now the dust is starting to settle. And in the end, the goal is to be able to attract and retain high-quality teachers. And that's what we're very committed to doing here. And it's clear that that's what the community wants. Because if you end up not keeping your good teachers, you're going to lose your standing on being a quality educational system. So figuring out a system that's fair to all concerned is going to be a challenge. But what I like about the process we have in place is that teachers are a very integral part of the decisions that will be made for what those standards are. And right now, you can't base it all just on test scores of students, because then you start teaching to a test. And so there's a balance right now. It looks like it's a good mix. We are mandated to have this in place by the fall of 2014. So we're getting closer to that, and there's going to be bugs that probably will have to be worked out. Right now, Hudson's in a challenging spot because of the economy after the recession in 2008. We've taken fiscal positions that are very, very conservative, that have been good for the taxpayers of this district, and the teachers have frozen their pay in some years. But in doing that and in keeping our budget to the point where over a 5-year period we had only a 7.5% increase in the total budget, there comes a cost. Eventually you have to pay the piper, and you don't want to get in a situation where you're 20 to 30% behind other districts in what they're paying. We're already seeing that, for instance, starting teachers' pay is higher at the surrounding districts, and so we've had to do a little bit of catch-up in that regard to stay competitive. We don't want a situation where teachers who have been here for 16 years, have master's degrees, are being paid less than somebody who was hired just 2 years ago with less experience, and they're getting more money. We can't have those kind of internal inequities, nor can we have teachers getting paid $15,000 to $20,000 more by just going 10 miles down the road to Woodbury or Stillwater, et cetera. So that's going to be a challenge, but what we're not in the system anymore of steps and ladders or rungs that they used to have, where you have so much education and so many years experience, this is what your pay is, regardless of what quality of teacher you are. And we're going to be getting away from that. I think it can be a good thing, and I think that the teachers I've talked to are actually welcoming that. And I know that we've got some very quality teachers who will stand up to that challenge and will help us make those decisions so that we have a good system in place.
We talked about you're a runner.
Yes.
And I know you've been involved in races. How many races do you do per year?
Well, I do a couple 5Ks or 10Ks, one 10-mile a year for sure, and then 2 to 3 half marathons. I've done 19 half marathons since I started running about 11 years ago.
And one of the, not comical, but more interesting ones dealt with down at Disney, as I recall.
Okay, yes.
That very early in the morning, and it was cold, and
yes,
can you
that was
share
2006. We decided we needed another half marathon because we're running Grandma's. When I say we, is my best friend, who I mentioned earlier, got me into running, and he did it by taking me to Grandma's. And I'm sitting at the finish line there in Duluth on Canal Drive, watching finishers come in at the 5.5, 6 hour mark, and some of these people are in their 70s and they're 300 plus pounds. And if they can finish a full marathon, I can try and do a half. And so that's what I got into halves. And I was doing pretty good. First couple of years, you improve a little bit. And then we decided to do a destination trip. And this Disney marathon weekend. So they do a half marathon on Saturday, and they do a full marathon on Sunday. And they have what is called the Goofy Challenge. If you do both the half and the full on back-to-back days, I think you have to be goofy to do that. So our wives, they signed up for the 5 or 10K, which was the shorter, the 5K, and that they were going to do that. And we did the half, but you had to be up so early. We flew in late on a Friday, and the race was Saturday morning for the half, and you had to be at the park by 4 a.m. Eastern time, which of course 3 a.m. Central time. So we're sitting there, it's still pitch black, and it was 36 degrees, and we're going to warm weather destinations. This is supposed to be what it's for. But yeah, I just remember being in line, and people are huddled in blankets, and they're wearing, long sleeves. And my buddy and I, of course, being from the climate we are in the middle of February, we thought 36 degrees felt warm, so we ran it in t-shirt and shorts, and the first 2/3 of the race in pitch black. You can barely see unless you are running under a street light, which wasn't very frequent because you go between the parks and there's potholes you have to dodge and everything. But it was quite the experience. It wasn't until you got to Magic Kingdom you could actually see 5 feet in front of you and see how many other people, a lot of people walked that race, but it was like, 20,000 people. It was quite the experience.
So, well, I'm at the end of my list here, and so I thank you for being the guest, and I wish you great success in the future as the host.
All right. Well, thank you for being the guest host, and I have to say you did a great job. I'm a little worried about job security here.
I don't think so. Thank you.